In life, we often face situations where we feel the urge to control others, whether it's their actions, their behavior, or their responses to us. We are naturally inclined to want things to go our way. We want people to behave the way we expect them to, act in accordance with our beliefs, or follow the paths we believe are best for them. It's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that if we can just get others to see things our way or behave as we want, our lives would be so much easier and peaceful. But this line of thinking sets us up for frustration and disappointment. The truth is, we cannot control the actions, thoughts, or feelings of other people as much as we may try. We can never fully dictate how others behave. The more we try to control those around us, the more we set ourselves up for failure and anger. It's a hard lesson to learn, but understanding that you cannot control others is one of the first steps in freeing yourself from unnecessary frustration. When we expect others to act in a certain way and they don't meet our expectations, our immediate reaction is often negative. It might be anger, disappointment, frustration, or resentment. However, we must come to realize that this reaction stems from a place of trying to force the world around us into our desired mold. We want things to go according to our plan. And when they don't, we feel betrayed or upset. This can happen in any relationship, whether it's with a family member, a friend, a colleague, or even a stranger. In fact, the closer we are to someone, the more we tend to expect them to behave in ways that please us or align with our value. Consider the dynamics of a relationship. When someone close to us acts in a way that we disagree with, it's easy to take it personally. We may feel hurt or angry because we think their actions are somehow a reflection of our own worth or our relationship with them. This often leads to frustration, as we believe if they truly cared about us or understood us, they would act differently. But in reality, every individual has their own perspective, their own life experiences, and their own struggles that shape how they behave. No matter how much we want to influence or change them, their behavior is ultimately their responsibility, not ours. This understanding is liberating because it allows us to shift the focus away from trying to control others and instead focus on how we respond to them. We may not be able to change others, but we can certainly change ourselves. It's important to acknowledge that we cannot control anyone's thoughts or actions. And by accepting this reality, we open ourselves up to greater peace. When we release the need to control others, we free ourselves from constant disappointment and emotional turmoil. Our anger often arises when we feel like we have been wronged or disrespected by someone's actions. But when we realize that their behavior is a reflection of their own thoughts and experiences, not a personal attack on us, we can let go of that anger. We are no longer tethered to their behavior, and our peace is no longer dependent on them. Moreover, accepting that we cannot control others doesn't mean that we are passive or indifferent. It simply means we learn to set healthy boundaries and manage our own expectations. If someone behaves in a way that is harmful or hurtful, we don't have to accept that behavior. But we also don't need to let it stir up anger within us. We can respond with understanding, calmness, and wisdom, while also choosing to protect ourselves and our peace. Instead of reacting impulsively or angrily, we can choose a response that is grounded in self-control and compassion. This understanding also extends beyond the people we interact with daily. It includes those we encounter casually, like drivers on the road, colleagues at work, or even distant acquaintances. We often get frustrated by these people's behavior because we feel that they are inconveniencing us or disrupting our plans. But when we acknowledge that we cannot control their actions, we shift our perspective. We stop seeing these people as obstacles to our happiness and start recognizing them as individuals who are navigating their own struggles, just as we are. The key to mastering peace lies in shifting our energy from controlling others to controlling ourselves. When we stop trying to change everyone around us and start focusing on how we can respond with grace and patience, we unlock a level of peace that is not dependent on circumstances. We begin to realize that the peace we are seeking is not found in the actions of others, but in our own ability to choose how we react. This also requires a deep sense of humility, recognizing that we cannot control others, reminds us that we too are imperfect. We have our own flaws, mistakes, and weaknesses. Just as we don't want others to judge us harshly for our shortcomings, we should extend that same grace to others. We must stop holding others to an unrealistic standard, one that requires them to act in a way that satisfies our expectation. Instead, we must learn to embrace the reality that people are flawed, and that's okay. It's not our place to control their flaws, but to accept them with understanding and love. When you practice patience, you are not merely enduring, you are choosing to respond thoughtfully and with control. Patience is not the absence of frustration or irritation, but rather the ability to manage those emotions in such a way that they do not dictate your behavior. This is where self-retribution becomes crucial. Self-retribution is the ability to regulate one's emotions, thoughts, and behaviors in the face of external demands, to resist the urge to react impulsively or negatively. Together, patience and self-control can protect us from falling into the trap of anger, irritation, or bitterness when things do not go as we expect. In every moment of frustration, there is an opportunity for growth. Whether someone cuts you off in traffic, a colleague takes credit for your work, or a loved one forgets an important event, your natural reaction might be anger, disappointment, or even resentment. These reactions, while normal, often stem from an emotional place that is out of our control. But patience and self-control invite us to step outside of our initial emotional response and choose how we will react. This is not about suppressing our feelings. It is about recognizing that we are not slaves to those feelings. Instead of letting frustration dictate our actions, we can choose to pause, reflect, and respond with understanding. Patience allows us to step back and evaluate the situation more clearly. Often, in the heat of the moment, we react without fully understanding the context or the reasons behind someone else's behavior. By being patient, we give ourselves the space to consider all aspects of a situation before we respond. This does not mean we condone wrong actions or let others walk over us, but it means we do not react out of impulse or emotion. We take a step back and choose to act with clarity, not chaos. Self-driven, on the other hand, requires practice. It's easy to lose control of our emotions. especially when we feel hurt or threatened. But true strength lies in our ability to maintain composure, even in challenging situations. When you practice self-critique, you're not just avoiding a rash decision or a hasty response. You are choosing to act in a way that reflects who you are, not who the situation makes you feel like. This might mean biting your tongue when you want to say something hurtful, walking away when you feel your temper rising, or taking a deep breath to regain your calm. When you practice patience and self-control, you begin to understand the importance of timing. Not every situation requires an immediate response. In fact, many of the most productive and peaceful moments in our lives come from our ability to delay our reaction and wait for the right time to act. Sometimes, when we allow ourselves the time to think and to process, we give ourselves the chance to choose a response that is thoughtful and measured, rather than one driven by anger or frustration. In doing so, we protect our relationships and maintain our peace. One of the most important aspects of patience and self-control is the ability to forgive. Patience requires us to tolerate things we do not like, and self-betrayal helps us to let go of the urge to take revenge or hold under grudges. When we are wronged by someone, our first impulse might be to react in anger, to lash out, or to seek retribution. But patience allows us to remember that people make mistakes, and that sometimes their behavior is not a reflection of us, but of their own struggles and weaknesses. When we practice self-control, we choose not to carry the burden of resentment or anger, but to forgive and move forward. Self-retraction is also essential in managing expectations. We often get angry because reality does not meet our expectations. We expect people to behave a certain way, we expect outcomes to align with our efforts, and we expect life to be predictable. When things do not meet these expectations, frustration and anger are quick to follow. But when we practice patience and self-control, we learn to adjust our expectations and accept life as it comes, not as we want it to be. This doesn't mean we lower our standards or settle for less. It simply means we become more adaptable and open to the unpredictable nature of life. In this way, patience and self-control protect us from the emotional turmoil that can arise from unrealistic expectations. There is also a deeper spiritual aspect to practicing patience and self-control. These virtues remind us that we are not in control of the world around us. We cannot control how others act, the circumstances we face, or the outcomes of our efforts. But what we can control is how we respond. This mindset fosters a sense of humility, as we realize that our peace does not depend on external circumstances, but on our internal ability to remain calm, composed, and centered. Patience and self-concentration lead us to a place where we can accept the things we cannot change, while still taking positive, constructive action in the areas where we do have control. True patience and self-control are not developed overnight. They require practice, self-awareness, and most importantly, intentionality. Every moment in life is an opportunity to strengthen these virtues. Whether you are dealing with a frustrating colleague, a miscommunication with a friend, or a difficult situation at home, you have a choice. You can choose to react in anger, frustration, or disappointment, or you can choose to pause, breathe, and respond with patience and self-control. The more you practice these virtues, the easier it becomes to maintain peace in the midst of chaos, and the more you will find that you are not at the mercy of the people and situations around you, but at peace with yourself. Forgiveness is one of the most powerful forces in the human experience, yet it is also one of the most misunderstood. Many people think of forgiveness as something we do for others, as if we are doing them a favor by letting go of our resentment. However, true forgiveness is not a gift for the other person, it is a gift for ourselves. Holding on to anger, resentment, or bitterness only harms us. It traps us in a cycle of negativity where the person who hurt us continues to have control over our emotions, even long after the event has passed. Forgiveness, on the other hand, frees us from that cycle and gives us back our peace. Forgiveness does not mean that we condone or excuse the wrong that was done to us. It does not mean that we forget the hurt or pretend it didn't happen. Forgiveness is not about minimizing the pain or injustice we have experienced. Instead, it is about choosing to release the hold that the offense has over us. When we forgive, we are making a conscious decision to no longer allow the past to dictate our emotional state in the present. We are choosing to let go of the anger and hurt that we have carried, not because the other person deserves our forgiveness, but because we deserve peace. One of the most challenging aspects of forgiveness is that it often feels like an act of surrender. When someone wrongs us, we want to retaliate, to make them pay for the hurt they caused. We may feel justified in our anger, believing that our bitterness is earned and our resentment is righteous. But the reality is that holding on to anger does not punish the other person, it punishes us. It keeps us tethered to the past, to a moment of pain that we cannot change, while preventing us from moving forward and embracing the future. By forgiving, we choose to break free from the chains of resentment that bind us. Forgiveness is also not about forgetting the offense. Some may believe that in order to forgive, they must completely erase the memory of the hurt, but this is not the case. Forgiveness is not about erasing the past, but about choosing not to let it control our present. We may remember the hurt, but we no longer allow it to take up space in our hearts and minds. We acknowledge the pain, but we refuse to let it dictate how we feel, how we behave, or how we view the person who caused it. In this way, forgiveness empowers us to take back control of our emotions and our life. It is also important to recognize that forgiveness is a process, not a one-time event. In many cases, forgiveness is not immediate or instantaneous. It can take time to truly release the anger and hurt, especially if the offense was particularly deep or painful. There may be days when we feel like we have forgiven, and other days when the old feelings of bitterness and resentment resurface. But each time we choose to forgive, even if it is difficult, we are making progress. Forgiveness is a journey, one that requires patience and grace with ourselves as much as with others. The key is to keep choosing forgiveness even when it feels hard. Forgiveness is also essential in the context of our relationships. We all hurt one another, whether intentionally or unintentionally. We all make mistakes, say things we don't mean, and fail to meet the expectations of those we love. It's inevitable. But if we hold on to grudges and refuse to forgive, We create distance in our relationships, and that distance can grow into bitterness, resentment, and ultimately isolation. The refusal to forgive can poison a relationship, making it harder to communicate, harder to trust, and harder to move forward together. On the other hand, when we forgive, we open the door to healing. We make room for reconciliation and for growth, both individually and as a couple, family, or community. The process of forgiveness also brings healing to our own hearts. When we forgive, we release the heavy burden of anger and resentment that weighs us down. We no longer have to carry the pain of the past in our hearts. In fact, studies have shown that holding on to unforgiveness can have physical effects on our health, contributing to stress, anxiety, and even chronic illness. Forgiveness, on the other hand, is linked to better mental and physical health, as it allows us to let go of negative emotions and experience greater peace and well-being. By forgiving, we are not just releasing others from the debt they owe us. We are releasing ourselves from the toxic grip of unresolved anger and hurt. Another powerful aspect of forgiveness is that it invites empathy and compassion into our lives. When we forgive someone, we begin to understand that they too are human. They too have their own struggles, their own weaknesses, and their own imperfections. This doesn't justify their actions, but it helps us see them as people rather than as villains. It allows us to approach the situation with greater compassion and understanding, rather than with judgment or condemnation. In forgiving, we open ourselves up to the possibility of healing, not just the wound, but the relationship itself. It transforms the way we view others, moving us from a place of anger and defensiveness to one of empathy and grace. Forgiveness also teaches us the importance of letting go. We often hold on to grudges because we feel like we need to hold someone accountable for the wrong they've done. We want them to feel the weight of their actions, to understand the pain they caused us. But holding on to anger does not make the other person suffer. It only prolongs our own suffering. By choosing to forgive, we let go of the need for the other person to make things right. We release the control we have over the situation and trust that healing can occur without the other person's involvement. This release is liberating. It is the act of freeing ourselves from the emotional weight of the past, allowing us to move forward with our life. Forgiveness is a choice, and it is one of the most powerful choices we can make. It is not easy, and it is not always immediate, but it is always worth it. When we forgive, we release ourselves from the chains of anger and bitterness, and we open ourselves up to healing, peace, and reconciliation. We do not forgive because the other person deserves it. We forgive because we deserve peace. We forgive because it allows us to live free from the burdens of the past, to walk in the present with greater compassion and understanding, and to move forward into the future with hope. One of the most profound truths about life is the realization that we have very little control over the events that happen to us and the people we encounter. Life is unpredictable, and no matter how hard we try to anticipate every turn, there will always be moments where things go awry. We cannot control the actions of others, the unforeseen challenges that arise, or the outcomes of our endeavors. Yet, we often waste a great deal of energy trying to control these things. And in doing so, we set ourselves up for frustration, anxiety, and anger. The key to peace and emotional stability lies not in controlling everything around us, but in focusing on what we can control: our thoughts, our actions, and our responses. Our emotional well-being is frequently disrupted when we attempt to control things that are beyond our influence. When someone disappoints us or acts in a way that frustrates us, our first instinct might be to try to change their behavior or make them see things from our perspective. But we must come to understand that no matter how hard we try, we cannot force someone else to think, feel, or act in a way that aligns with our desire. People have their own minds, their own experiences, and their own reasons for behaving as they do. Trying to change them will only leave us frustrated and angry. Similarly, we often get upset about situations that are completely outside of our control: the weather, the economy, the actions of government officials. These are just a few examples of things that we cannot influence, yet we often expend a great deal of mental energy worrying about them. We may find ourselves upset over a rainstorm that spoils our outdoor plans, or angry about the state of the world. But in these instances, it's important to ask ourselves, what can I control? When we shift our focus from what we can't control to what we can, we reclaim our power. We may not be able to change the weather, but we can change how we respond to it. If it's raining, we can choose to stay inside and enjoy the comfort of our home. Or we can find a way to enjoy the rain itself. We may not be able to change the political landscape, but we can take steps to make a positive impact in our communities. Or we can focus on cultivating gratitude and peace in our own lives, rather than being consumed by anger and frustration. In every situation, we have the power to choose our response. This doesn't mean we will always choose the right response, but it does mean that we have the ability to decide how we want to react. And often, that decision determines whether we will find peace or remain in turmoil. When we focus on what we can control, we take responsibility for our own emotional state. Instead of blaming others or circumstances for our unhappiness, we recognize that our emotional well-being depends largely on our own choices. The most important thing we can control is our attitude. How we choose to view a situation has a profound impact on how we feel about it. When faced with challenges, we can choose to see them as obstacles or as opportunities for growth. A setback can be an opportunity to learn. A disappointment can be a chance to practice patience. And a difficult person can be an invitation to exercise compassion. By shifting our perspective, we can turn frustration into empowerment. And we can choose to find peace even in the most challenging circumstances. Our actions, too, are within our control. We cannot control the actions of others, but we can control how we behave in relation to them. If someone treats us poorly, we may not be able to change their behavior, but we can choose how we respond. We can choose to remain calm, to address the situation with kindness, or to set boundaries in a way that protects our peace. By focusing on how we can respond, we take ownership of our emotional state and refuse to let others dictate how. It's in these moments that we truly discover our own power. Focusing on what we can control also helps us cultivate gratitude. When we stop fixating on the things we can't change, we start to notice the blessings we already have. Instead of resenting a difficult situation, we learn to be grateful for the lessons it teaches us. Instead of complaining about what we don't have, we begin to appreciate the abundance already present in our life. Gratitude shifts our focus from what is wrong to what is right, and in doing so, it opens the door to greater peace and contentment. Furthermore, focusing on what we can control enables us to set healthy boundaries. Many of the frustrations we experience come from allowing others to dictate our emotions or expectations. By focusing on what we can control, we gain the clarity and strength to set boundaries that protect our emotional well-being. We no longer feel compelled to meet others' expectations at the expense of our own peace. Setting boundaries is not about controlling others. It's about taking control of our own lives and ensuring that we protect our peace and well-being. Ultimately, focusing on what we can control empowers us to take charge of our lives. Instead of feeling helpless in the face of adversity, we recognize that our peace, our actions, and our attitude are always within our grasp. When we let go of the illusion of control over others and external circumstances, we find true freedom. We stop being victims of the world around us and start becoming the masters of our own hearts. It is in this place of self-mastery that we discover true peace and emotional resilience. In the chaotic world that we live in, inner peace is not something that simply happens. It is something that must be cultivated. It's easy to be at peace when everything is going smoothly, when everything aligns with our desires, and when our lives are free from conflict. However, true inner peace is not the absence of conflict, nor is it the result of external circumstances. It is the ability to remain calm and grounded in the midst of challenges, to find contentment no matter what life throws our way. Cultivating this inner peace is an ongoing process, one that requires intention, discipline, and a deep understanding of the nature of peace itself. The first step in cultivating inner peace is to recognize that peace is not something we find externally. It is something we create within ourselves. Often we believe that peace is dependent on the people around us, the environment we live in, or the circumstances we face. We think that if only the world were different, we would feel more at peace. But the reality is that peace is an internal state of being. It is a mindset, a choice, and a reflection of how we relate to the world, not the world itself. When we begin to understand that peace is an internal resource, we free ourselves from the idea that we need to control the world around us to be happy. We realize that no matter what is happening in our lives, we have the power to choose how we respond. One of the most important ways to cultivate inner peace is through mindfulness and presence. Much of our inner turmoil arises when we are either dwelling on the past or worrying about the future. We ruminate on past mistakes, regrets, or missed opportunities, and we anticipate future challenges, imagining the worst possible outcomes. This constant mental chatter pulls us away from the present moment where true peace exists. Peace is found in the present, in the here and now. When we learn to be fully present in each moment, we stop the cycle of worry and regret, and we allow ourselves to experience life as it is. without the added weight of fear or guilt. Mindfulness is the practice of paying attention to our thoughts, emotions, and experiences without judgment. It is about observing what is happening in our minds and bodies without getting swept up in the emotions or narratives that arise. When we practice mindfulness, we develop the ability to step back from our thoughts and create a space between stimulus and reaction. This space gives us the freedom to choose how we want to respond to what is happening in our lives, rather than being carried away by our impulses and emotions. Mindfulness brings us back to the present moment, where we can experience peace regardless of the external circumstances. Alongside mindfulness, another key to cultivating inner peace is acceptance. We often resist the reality of our lives, wishing that things were different, that people were different, or that situations would change. This resistance creates inner conflict. When we accept life as it is, when we accept ourselves as we are, we release the constant struggle for control and the need for things to be different. Acceptance does not mean resignation or complacency. It means acknowledging the present moment without judgment and without the desire to change it. It is about surrendering to what is, knowing that we have the power to respond to it in a way that aligns with our values and our well-being. Acceptance creates a sense of peace because it allows us to stop fighting against the current of life and to begin flowing with it. Forgiveness is another powerful tool for cultivating inner peace. As human beings, we will inevitably experience hurt, betrayal, and disappointment. Holding on to grudges or nursing resentment only poisons our own hearts, trapping us in a cycle of anger and pain. When we forgive, we release ourselves from the emotional burden of the past. We let go of the need for retribution, and in doing so, we free ourselves from the grip of negative emotion. Forgiveness is not about excusing the actions of others or minimizing the hurt we have experienced. It is about choosing to release ourselves from the pain that comes with holding on to anger. When we forgive, we make room for healing, for peace, and for the possibility of moving forward. Gratitude is another vital practice in cultivating inner peace. When we focus on what is wrong in our lives, on what we don't have, or on what isn't working, we perpetuate feelings of dissatisfaction and unrest. However, when we shift our focus to the things we are grateful for, we begin to see the abundance that already exists in our lives. Gratitude shifts our perspective, allowing us to appreciate the simple joys, the small victories, and the beauty that surrounds us. It helps us to find peace in the present moment by reminding us that there is always something to be thankful for, even in the midst of difficulty. Gratitude nourishes the soul and creates an inner sense of contentment that is not dependent on external circumstances. Contentment plays a significant role in fostering inner peace. We often chase after things, whether material possessions, accomplishments, or approval from others, believing that once we have them, we will finally be at peace. Yet true contentment comes not from achieving more or acquiring more, but from being at peace with what we already have. Contentment is about appreciating the present moment and finding joy in the simple things. It is about realizing that our worth is not determined by what we own, what we achieve, or what others think of us, but by our inherent value as individuals. When we cultivate contentment, we stop seeking fulfillment outside of ourselves and begin to find it within. This allows us to experience peace regardless of our external circumstances. Another essential aspect of inner peace is maintaining a sense of balance. Life is filled with ups and downs, and it is easy to get swept away by the highs or weighed down by the lows. However, true peace comes from the ability to maintain equilibrium in the face of both. Balance allows us to navigate life's challenges without being overwhelmed by them. When we cultivate balance, we create a steady foundation within ourselves that remains unaffected by the fluctuations of the external world. This inner balance allows us to experience peace regardless of the circumstances, knowing that we have the strength and resilience to weather any storm. Finally, cultivating inner peace requires intentionality. It is not something that happens by accident or without effort. We must be intentional about our thoughts, our actions, and our habits. We must choose peace even when it feels difficult. We must create space for stillness, for reflection, and for self-care. We must be proactive about letting go of negativity, releasing our attachment to outcomes, and finding joy in the present moment. The more we practice these principles, the more they become ingrained in our lives, and the easier it becomes to live in a state of peace and contentment. Inner peace is not something that can be achieved overnight, but with consistent effort, mindfulness, acceptance, forgiveness, gratitude, contentment, balance, and intentionality, we can create a life of peace that transcends the external noise and chaos. It is a peace that is rooted deep within us, a peace that remains unshaken by the challenges we face, and a peace that flows from our own hearts. In conclusion, the path to never being angered or bothered by anyone begins with a deep understanding of the nature of our emotions and the power we hold over them. By choosing to control our responses rather than our circumstances, we cultivate a life of peace and resilience. Embracing forgiveness, focusing on what we can control, and shifting our perspectives are all essential practices in this journey. It is through mindful awareness, acceptance, and the intentional pursuit of inner peace that we discover true freedom from the influences of the outside world. Ultimately, the more we practice these principles, the more we come to realize that our peace is not dependent on others, but on the choices we make every day. When we let go of the need to control or change others, when we refuse to hold on to anger or resentment, and when we choose to focus on what we can control, we create a life rooted in calmness, joy, and contentment. It is a life where we are no longer disturbed by the actions of others or the events around us, but where we find true peace, regardless of external circumstance. By consistently embracing these truths and applying them to our daily lives, we unlock a profound sense of inner peace that cannot be easily shaken. It is in this state of peace that we experience the freedom to live fully, to love freely, and to walk through life without being burdened by anger or frustration.